What is up, Internet? You may wonder, we have a fellow comrade here somewhere on the screen. This is Andrew. And Andrew and I actually both are active connoisseurs of generative AI, and we both actually create content around it in different places. So I wanted to have a conversation with Andrew and learn more about what he does, his tips and tricks from 2024, since right now it's actually January 1st. It's the new year, 2025. So some things that he's learned throughout the year and maybe some goals for next year. And I'll do the same with him. Andrew.
Awesome. Yeah. Hey, thanks, Dylan. Good to catch up with you, man. It's been a while since we hung out, and it's good to see you. And love seeing your content on YouTube as well. But it's been a huge year for AI and developing products with AI, and I think we're gonna have a lot to talk about.
Cool. So how do you want to do this, Andrew? Do you want to do back and forth, or do you want to do me? Like I'll go first and you go. Like how do you want to do this?
Um, yeah. What's our first topic?
So I have a list of things that I wrote down that I would like to talk about. One. So the first one for me is ChatGPT Canvas, and I wanted to call that out for the fact that it's a new feature. They just released it. I think it was during the 12 days of Christmas or right before that. And one thing I've found it extremely useful for that I feel like a lot of people aren't taking advantage of is actively editing existing documents inside of Canvas as if it were Google Docs. And to me, like OpenAI is basically trying to take over Google Suite. If you look at their extension for search, if you look at Canvas, if you look at like all the different features they're rolling out, they're all related to the Google Suite. So it's like Google Docs, search, etc. Um, and I found it extremely useful. Do you want me to show you a quick example of how I use it?
Yeah, actually, let's dive into Canvas, and you should drive this one because I actually haven't played around with Canvas a lot. I saw the announcement, I watched some demos. It looks really cool, but I haven't had a reason to dive in there. So I'd love to see kind of what you're doing with it.
Dope. I'm going to try to give you a reason to use it now. All right. So now you can see behind the scenes, folks, is some notes. So here's a prompt that I have that I use from time to time, and I'm going to use an old blog that I wrote as an example. So I won't put everything in here, but I'm going to copy some text from this. I'm going to place that text in ChatGPT, and then I'm also going to put this prompt here, which I'll explain in a second. All right. Okay. I think, are these two canvases side by side?
I think so.
I didn't know.
Sometimes it annoys me when I get the A/B tests because I'm like, I have to help you train your model now.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna look and see which one has more comments, and that's the one that wins.
Nice.
All right.
Oh,
So
that's interesting. Yeah.
so this one's still going, but what it's doing is it's adding comments in line with the thing that I've written, and then
Hmm.
I'll show you when I expand it out. Those comments should have a suggested improvement, and also why it thinks it should be improved, and
Hmm.
it'll highlight that specific sentence that should be improved.
Cool.
So I'm gonna do this one because it's 8. And then maybe if I do this, oh, here we go, perfect.
Gosh,
So you
that's
can see all
slick.
these have been highlighted, right? And if I click into one of these, it says, okay, this sentence, da, 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 it gives you a reason why it can be improved. So engaging but avoiding a word quickly, and then it gives you an example of what should be improved and how it can be rewritten. And then the cool thing here is that it doesn't just give you an example, but if I push apply, it actually takes that recommended suggestion and it applies it to that sentence only.
Awesome. I
Isn't that
love
crazy?
that. It's really slick. Watch out, Google Docs.
Exactly. But yeah, so this is a feature I use literally all the time. So anytime I'm writing, which is quite a lot, so emails, blog posts, like anything that
Mm-hmm.
I'm crafting that's long form, I'll usually throw it into here and I'll have it edited in line, and I'll actually give it specific because I like a certain type of writing style. I don't like all writing styles, and my preference is in this prompt. Um, so it sounds silly, but I actually have it right at a fifth grade reading level,
Oh yeah, yeah. You
and
want accessibility in the writing.
exactly, yeah, and oftentimes it makes the words more succinct and easier to understand. But also, I change the sentence length as well, so I ask it to vary the sentence length between medium and short.
Mm,
Never use long sentences, only medium and short, and it makes it much easier to skim and consume faster. So that's kind of the first thing I've learned over the last year.
that's great. Yeah, on the fifth grade writing piece, I learned this factoid a while back that I thought was interesting. Maybe you know it already, but if you analyze presidential speeches in the US throughout history, they average around somewhere between third to fifth grade reading level. And it's this idea that when you want to speak to a large audience, you really want to lower the complexity of your writing so that it's much more approachable.
I didn't know. That's an interesting fun fact.
Yeah. Yeah, another thought that's coming to mind as I'm just kind of watching you use Canvas and I'm looking at it and it looks just like a Google Docs experience, but they chose the word Canvas and I wonder, just wondering out loud right now, if that might be a hint at the longer term vision for this product, if they might start to pull in image generation and image manipulation and even video with Sora. I wonder if a lot of these Gen AI tools will start to land in Canvas beyond text. What do you think?
Maybe. I think for the video models, they'll probably keep those separate because they're so expensive. And
Mm-hmm.
it's more of like an Adobe like Premiere Pro kind of thing. Like they might create like a canvas for Premiere Pro for Adobe or something like that, or DaVinci. I think it's like DaVinci Resolve or whatever the
Yep.
video editors are. Um, I think Canvas is likely going to have like probably images, all the edits of text, but it's one of those situations where you can utilize something like this. It's like Google Docs on steroids, right? Because you have AI helping you write, not just things you already created, but also creating things from scratch. It's like the whole blank canvas is, the writer's worst
Yeah.
enemy.
Yep. Yeah, I could see myself using this for blog posts. I just started a Substack literally today. I made my first post.
Nice.
So I could see myself weaving my Substack drafts into this tool. Also for longer form TikToks or YouTubes that are a little bit more script driven. I don't do a lot of that stuff to be honest. It's usually pretty on the fly improvised. But if I wanted to take more of a script driven approach, I would see myself using this for that.
Nice. Congrats on the Substack.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm
Very
excited.
cool. So what's one thing you wanted to share?
Let's see. I'll pull up this image that I was sharing a moment ago. Thanks for the Canvas walkthrough. Yeah, it looks really cool. Um, and I'm curious to hear your take on Cursor if you've been using it or a similar tool as well. But so I've been heavily using Cursor. For anyone who hasn't seen it, this is the Cursor icon in the bottom left here. I've been heavily using it for my own product development for not that long, like 2 3 months really. But I've really gone all in. The way I'm thinking about all of these different AI assistant software development tools or products is I'm like actively not trying all of them. Instead, I'm actively investing in Cursor and trying to get good at that because my hunch is that these skills will be highly transferable from one to the other. So whether it's windsurf or bolt or cursor, like they're probably all going to be pretty similar in the long run. So I just want to get really good at what it feels like to be doing this kind of like prompt driven software development. And I chose cursor. Um, and so I made this image a couple of weeks ago to try to communicate what my workflow kind of looks like, what the distribution looks like these days. Um, so bottom left is cursor. Here's me on the bottom right with my laptop. GPT-4o top right, and then O1. You could replace that with O3. Actually, I made this image before O3 came out. But my workflow is basically 80% of the time it's just me and cursor, back and forth, back and forth. I'm building a feature, I'm fixing a bug, whatever I'm doing on my product, I'm just prompting cursor directly, either in its chat feature or usually its composer feature, and we're just going back and forth. And Cursor does have a model drop down. You can select which model. It defaults to Claude. I typically just use that unless it's having downtime or I've run out of tokens or whatever. I switch over to GPT-4o. But that's my most of my workflow, 80% of the time. 15% of the time, if I want to do something a little bit more complicated, Let's say it might involve like some re-architecture, or it's a brand new feature that's a little bit more complicated, and I need to really kind of think through how am I going to approach this? How should an engineer approach making these changes? Um, I'll go into 4.0 or a comparable model, and I'll enlist it to kind of basically just help me, help guide me in my thinking. How should I think about approaching this task, this feature? And so I'll collaborate with 4.0 to come up with a dev plan, and then I take that dev plan and then I go back into Cursor with it, and then I'm back in this 80% loop, back and forth, back and forth. But I'm implementing the plan that 4.0 helped me create, right? And then 5% of the time, so not very often, I don't find myself needing to go to these like chain of thought, like reasoning models too often. But 5% of the time, if I want to do something really big, a really big change, um, or if I'm starting a product from scratch, this is usually when I'm using this. Like I want to build out, you know, all of user management and authentication, as well as like some basic social features, a bunch of stuff at once. What I'll do is I'll enlist 4.0 to help me draft a mega prompt that then goes into O1. And then O1's goal is going to be to create this giant list of engineering tickets, um, one at a time. And each ticket should be scoped like you would normally scope it for a human developer. And then I'll go one at a time through those tickets that O1 created. And then I just enter this 80% loop again, back and forth, back and forth. And so that's generally what my distribution looks like. Is I can actually hang out here most of the time, but for more sophisticated stuff, pop up here to these other models.
So it's really interesting to see your process because I have various, like, my process is somewhat similar to
Mm-hmm.
yours in
Mm-hmm.
the sense I don't know what the ratios are because I haven't really thought it through, but they're probably like somewhat in that range
Yeah.
that you have here. And I use them for similar reasons. So for me, in my head, I have like bucketed tools for development. So Cursor is my primary. And the reason Cursor is my primary, there's a few reasons, but one primary reason is that oftentimes you can use the docs feature. So you can actually upload API docs and libraries and things like that, and you can build on recent tools. So you don't have to only use what the model's been trained up to, but you can have it reference the docs when you add it to then pull that in. Um, I use Windsurf for macro assessments of files. So like if you have a large application with multiple files and you need to have a good understanding of what's going on between them, I've found that Windsurf is actually better than Cursor at that task specifically. And then for O1, I'll use it like you said for two reasons. One is either at the beginning of the project where I'll have it create uh, what's it, product requirements document, so a PRD, and that product requirements document is finalized by O1, but GPT-4o creates the first draft. And then I'll take the first draft and I'll feed it to O1 and say, hey, like improve on this in more detail and write it in a way that you're giving it to a noob engineer that knows nothing about like building anything and tell them exactly what to do the entire way through. And then I'll break that down and I'll feed that then into Cursor one by one. So it's like, let's start with step one. And actually another thing I'll do is I'll take that PRD and I'll have it put it into Markdown. And the Markdown file then has checkboxes for each phase. So it's in phase one, we have checkboxes, and I'll tell Cursor, I was like, all right, you're going to go in here, you're going to do phase one. Once you're done with phase one, check off the boxes, and then make sure you're done with everything that's in there. Then we'll go to phase two, and we'll go to phase three. And we check off everything as we go.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
interesting. And so it are in Composer you're using that, and it's actually
Yeah.
printing out the checkboxes checked or non-checked.
Yep.
Oh, that's cool. So
Yeah.
do you feed Composer multiple tickets at once, or do you feed it one ticket at a time typically?
So at the beginning, I'll give it the entire PRD, and I'll say, read this and make sure you understand what the application is trying to achieve and all that stuff. And then it says, yeah, I understand, I got it. I'm like, all right, cool. Once you've understood it, then let's start with step one. And it'll start with step one. So it has context of what the entire application is trying to achieve, but it then focuses in on the first thing and then goes to the next. So we iteratively build together.
Do
And
you
then
is it like kind of human in the loop where you review the result of step one and then say looks good and now move on to step two, or does it just go ahead and move on its own?
yeah, so that's a great question. So that if it's something that visually is easy to know if it's good or not, like if I'm trying to build an app and it's supposed to like push this button and it does that thing, if it does that, okay, we're good. But
Yep.
if it's something that's more complex that needs to be tested, then I'll actually have it write a test-driven development. So
Mm-hmm.
like each phase will have a test that's written beforehand. So you write your test first, and then you build the function. And then if the function doesn't achieve the test that you've written, then don't move on until the next step, like the next step kind of thing.
Yep. That's cool. Yeah, that's really smart. I love that. Another thing you mentioned, let's see, I might have lost it. You mentioned windsurf and how you're using windsurf differently. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I actually haven't tapped into windsurf. I thought it was kind of similar to Composer. I'm sorry, to Cursor.
Yeah, so it is somewhat similar. The primary thing that I use it for is if cursor like if I'm getting stuck in a problem and cursor is like not doing great and it's having issues and it's not getting past the thing I'm trying to get to, the first step is to go to Windsurf and say, all right, Windsurf, can you solve this? Because the thing is both of them have full context of the application because they can see into all the folder structures and everything. So I'll have it try to solve the problem that cursor couldn't. Um, and then also at the end of projects, oftentimes, I'm sure as you know, when you build with AI, it creates a bunch of files that are unnecessary. And it's like, all right, well, I have 50 files here, but I only need like 30. So then at the very end of the project, once it's functioning, everything works as expected, then I'll go to Windsurf and say, okay, look at the entire file structure and all the files inside of it, and tell me which of these are not needed, and it'll go through it and tell you exactly ones aren't needed, and then I'll delete those. I'll go through and delete all the files that are necessary, and then I'll have a much cleaner file structure for what's actually needed for that application. And then for also another problem solving thing, I'll use O1 sometimes as well. So if the cursor can't do it, Windsurf can't do it, and then I throw it to O1 and see if they can do it. And then I recently found out that Claude is actually a good one to go to as well outside of all of these. So if I don't want to use cursor and I don't want to use Windsurf and I just want to have Claude projects, build my code or build my application, I've actually found sometimes that Claude writes better code than Windsurf and Cursor,
Hmm.
even though I'm using Claude inside of Windsurf and Cursor, the same version.
What does better mean here?
So there's less errors when you first write it. So if
Less
I
errors.
write the same function and eat all three, this one is probably going to work out of the box without me having to deal with any errors. But these two might have errors that come
Gotcha.
out.
Yep. Okay. Yep. Yeah, and the LLM writing buggy code is very much part of the process, part of the experience, as you know. Um, when I when I talk to folks about this general workflow, that's one of the most common, I guess, sort of like blockers for people is like, but it's going to write bugs. It's going to have errors. Well, yeah, like humans do that too, um,
Yeah,
and and that's part of the development process. Whether you're using AI or not, is like you write code, you run it, it works or it doesn't, and then you iterate from there and you try to fix it. Like for me, I've always kind of been a little bit confused these past few months when people get so hung up on the LLM generating a bug. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, go through QA, review the code. Like, don't just don't just blindly accept all the code that it writes and then push it to prod. Like that would be irresponsible, and you wouldn't do that with a human dev either, right? And so it's kind of funny. I think sometimes folks make this jump from the LLMs writing the code to the LLMs writing the code, doing the testing, pushing to prod, like doing everything. Like you still need to do a lot of the normal software development cycles, and that might change with as more agents hit the scene, and we can have like QA agents and stuff like that. And but it's really about balancing your human in the loop flow and figuring out where the LLM adds the most value and where you, as the human, adds the most value. You each have different strengths and weaknesses, right? I'm not great at syntax. The LLM's awesome at syntax. Um, I'm good at knowing if it's working the way I want it to. The LLM sucks at that because it doesn't have all the context in my brain. And that's another one of the challenges is like training yourself, at least what I've had to do is training myself to figure out what context I need to be giving to cursor or to whatever model at any given point in time so that it can be successful, because it's not going to read my mind. It's not going to read between the lines. It's just going to do what I tell it to. And so that's most of the work I have to do is figure out what additional context I need to provide for it.
right. It's I have similar conversations with people where they assume that if LLMs write bugs, we should not use it
Yeah,
or we should not trust it.
yeah,
And
weird.
I have the same answer. I was like, okay, well then we shouldn't trust humans.
Exactly. It's a really easy answer. It's like, well, do humans write bugs?
Yeah,
Nope, never happened.
yeah. And also I think it's like there's like two things here. So one is like obviously you should put it inside the same CI/CD pipeline that every company has when they're putting out products in production. You should go through QA, security, all that stuff. But in addition to that, I feel like there's also a pushback that is probably subconscious that people are concerned that this is like quote unquote taking my job or undertaking like tasks that usually would take me 5 hours to do that I can do in like 5 minutes. So then like how do I spend my time?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's one of those things that we collectively as society will have to face and have conversations around
Yeah.
where you can expedite these processes and make them either completely automated and or like reduce it by 5 orders of magnitude.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's a natural concern, a natural fear around the my job's being taken fear, and it's certainly valid, and it's something we need to be thinking about. I made a post the other day around how I really believe that um, strong memorization of language syntax is a skill that's kind of on the decline right now, and moving into 25 is just going to be less valuable. Not that it has no value. It certainly has value to know the syntax of your language really, really well, of your coding language. But I think it's going to lose value over time because we can outsource that to LLMs. And a lot of people agree with it, but some people describe that sort of commentary as FUD, as fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And that created a little bit of cognitive dissonance in my mind because I'm kind of thinking, oh, to me this is not fun. To me this is actually liberating, because we as creators, builders, developers, designers, whatever, um, are 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 now liberated from this rote memorization that we've had to perform in the past to be good software developers. Um, we just don't need it as much. Now, I think when you get to certain types of tasks around, you need your code to be performant at a certain level or optimized for a very particular type of thing or whatever, um, then tweaks at the syntax level are going to matter a lot more, because, as you know, coding languages there's a handful of ways to say the same thing, just like there are in natural languages. So, and some are more performant than others. But the lion's share of stuff that we build, uh, either way you write it, it's probably okay. That's my take on it.
Yeah, it's I mean I would take it to an extreme. I think like I don't know what the time frame would be, but in my head, I feel like the concept of having to knowing programming languages in the first place is kind of like an outrageous task. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's something that agents eventually in the future and models themselves will take care of.
Yep.
And we just need to know how to explain what we want in an effective way. And if we
Correct.
don't, it doesn't matter because then they'll prompt us. So instead of us prompting models, they'll start prompting humans. I'm saying, oh, like you said this, but that doesn't really make sense. Maybe you want this instead. And it's more of a true back and forth instead of me just telling it to do stuff.
Oh, yeah, I love that. And I have a quick anecdote to share, and then we can move on to the next topic. But in this workflow, this is one of the moments that I had to walk away from my computer in both confusion, disbelief, and excitement. So I was prompting Cursor to do a very particular update to my code, and I knew exactly what I wanted, and I was pretty prescriptive in my prompting. Like, here's what I want you to do. Like, use null here, whatever, blah blah blah. And it had to do around adjusting the pricing tiers for my product, and and Cursor ignored my request, ignored certain details of my request, instead corrected me saying, I see what you're trying to do. I think a better way of approaching that would be this, and then wrote the code updates as follows. I read them and I agreed that it was a better update and it actually achieved my goal better.
Yeah. So that's definitely creepy, especially if you didn't prompt it to do that. Where,
No, I
where for
didn't.
me, it's like for me, oftentimes I do that. So I'll say like you're an expert. Like example is you're an expert web designer. You know everything about there is to like know about web design. and I'm going to give you some ideas of what I want to do, but I want you to actually, improve it in whatever way you think that should be. Like if you
Nice.
prompt it and say to do that, it's okay. But when it does it without you saying it, then that's like a little on the sketchy scale.
Correct. I didn't request it to improve my suggestion. But I
Yeah.
like that idea. Maybe I should be doing that.
Yeah. I mean, it'll be cool in the future when you don't have to.
Yeah.
Nice.
So, yeah, it's a fun one.
So another one I wanted to give here are actually prompt generators. So these are prompt generators baked into
Do you
OpenAI and
do you
Anthropic.
want to screen share anything? Sorry.
Yeah, yeah, I can show both.
Okay. Let you pull that up.
All right, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Groovy. So this is something that I feel like is completely under discussed and undervalued,
Mm.
and it's two tools that are kind of in beta and like discreetly hidden from Anthropic and OpenAI. I don't know why I don't talk about it more often, but they both have these prompt generators. So they generate prompts for you based off of an existing prompt you've given it. So it improves it with all the best practices that would go with a good prompt. And to get access to these, I think you have to have API credits set aside in each tool. So put in like $3 to $5, and then you can use that for like a year
Mm.
because each prompt generation is like 0.0000 something cents. It's like nothing. And to get to these, so for Anthropic, you have to go to their console, and that's the URL here. So it's console.anthropic.com.
Mm-hmm.
And then for ChatGPT, it's their playground. So it's platform.openai.com. Then you go to the playground tab here.
Mm-hmm.
And in both of these, they have this little magic button. So this is the OpenAI one. You click the magic button, then it gives you a prompt generator. You can see it's in beta. So what's an example prompt? Okay, let's do the website designer one I said. So here. Okay, so I've just put in 3 lines, right? So I said your website designer, your task is to assist with building a site that aligns with my interests, and I gave it some interests, and then I said I want you to think really hard about this.
Mm-hmm.
Very basic prompt, nothing special here. So when you do create, it's going to go off and create a better prompt. Well, that's doing that. I'm going to do the same thing here. So I'm going to paste that same thing here,
Great.
and they're both working in the background. And you can see immediately the prompt is much bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have to go through and
Much
read
bigger.
everything. But I'll just give you like a general understanding of what's happening, right? So it's gonna take the best practices of saying, okay, giving it a persona. So it gives it the persona, an expert, the interests, and then it breaks it into steps. So these are the steps you need to achieve as a model. And then it gives it the output format. So what should it look like when it comes out? And it gives it good examples of recommendations afterwards. And then some additional notes at the end. And then for Anthropic, you can see they actually do it in XML tags. So this is a really important thing to point out. So
Mm-hmm.
OpenAI, when you prompt OpenAI, it's better to prompt their models with Markdown and not XML tags, because their models, there's these things called delimiters. So the model wants to understand the difference between certain sections of your prompt, and each section of the prompt has a certain purpose. So Markdown is better for OpenAI, and XML tags are better for Anthropic's models, and they both use it in their prompting here. And then you can see the same thing here. So it gives it persona, task, it gives it the section of where it's going to put the information and read it, steps, and it gives it an output format as well here. And then some additional notes at the bottom for it to remember.
This is great. I will totally use these tools. I mean, so how is it, in your experience, how is it different than pasting that original prompt into, let's say, ChatGPT 4.0 or O1, and basically saying, you're an expert prompt engineer, like make this a better prompt?
Yeah. So I've asked myself that same question, and I've tried to experiment like A/B test,
Yeah.
and oftentimes I don't know what it is. I don't know what their system prompt is behind this,
Mm-hmm.
but almost every time it's better.
It's
And when
better.
I say better, it's like the prompt you can get from ChatGPT when you prompt it as a great like prompt engineer, it'll add more detail, and it maybe adds more specificity and maybe some like things like that.
Yep.
But very rarely does it use the delimiters of XML tags or Markdown.
Mm.
Very rarely does it add structure to it, where it's like, here's the steps, here's the output format, here are the examples, and here's the like additional, like very rarely do I see it kind of do it that well. And maybe it's just me not prompting it good enough and like creating a good system prompt in the back end to do this. But
Well, it's
I just do
interesting.
these all the time.
It's
Go
interesting
ahead.
because your experience is that the workflow I just asked you about using ChatGPT instead has poorer results, um, I guess that would kind of make sense because, if we assume 4.0's trained on the internet largely, and so it would just have whatever discussion and examples around prompt engineering already exist. And there's a little bit of best practice content out there, on OpenAI's websites, on Anthropic's websites, but it's probably the minority of all the discussion on prompt engineering. And so, yeah, I guess in this experience, they're probably able to much more specifically guide the final output and just ignore all that other discussion on
Right.
prompt engineering and say, no, this is actually the best practice to just use this.
Yeah. No, I wish I knew the magic sauce behind this, but there's some sort of like special magic they have going on in the back end to make these prompts really compelling.
But so, what about between OpenAI and Anthropic here, the two prompt generators? Do you have a preference?
Um, it really depends on the task. I've honestly found myself using Claude more than OpenAI, or
Okay.
GPT, and I don't know why, but it always just feels like Claude 3.5 Sonnet. It's just better
Hmm.
in almost every task. Coding, writing, the few things that I would use OpenAI for when it comes to these types of prompts and then building things out like this would be data analysis, because their code analyzer is quite good at assessing data sets and creating visuals from those data sets.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, it really comes down to preference of model and or model you have access to.
Let me run something by you. It's sort of related to this, but maybe it's a slight divergence, and we can come back. But um, I've been kicking around this idea that I don't have a ton of conviction on yet, but I'm starting to get there a little bit. And it's when you map these models, model families really, to operating systems, and I would think it's something like GPT and OpenAI is the Mac, Anthropic and Claude is the Microsoft, and then Meta and Llama, that's the most obvious one. It's the Linux because it's open source. Um, but those first two, I think it probably has less to do with the model itself and more to do with how I'm observing these companies strategically make decisions. Um, and OpenAI has done a really good job of being this sort of like out in front of the consumer first and partnering with education and just trying to get it in the hands of individuals. And Anthropic's done a really good job of like partnering with the military and the government and building out all these like additional like security layers and focusing more on alignment, at least publicly, and security. And they seem to be kind of moving in that direction. How does that analogy strike you?
So I've never thought about it that way. I've thought about them as operating systems and sitting at the core of like a future computer,
Yep.
but I've not thought about like the segmenting. So what are the segments again? So it's Microsoft's OpenAI, Anthropic. What's Anthropic?
Let's see. OpenAI, Microsoft. Oh no, I'm sorry. OpenAI, Mac, Apple,
Okay.
Anthropic, Microsoft, like the enterprise version.
Okay. Yeah. I I would actually think about them differently. I
Yep.
would I would I would swap those. I mean,
Okay.
and not for security purposes because I think Anthropic is likely more secure and or like has they might be equally secure, but you can tell they've publicly talked more about alignment. Um, but the reason I would say Anthropic might be more Apple-esque is that
Mm.
they seem to take longer to ship things,
Yep. Okay. I
and
can see that.
they tend to be like under the covers and stuff when they ship things too. And then OpenAI tends to like either have a lot of stuff leaked and or they just like ship things quickly.
Yep. That is
But the
absolutely
analogy,
true.
go ahead. What, say it again.
I was just agreeing with your point there.
Yeah, and the analogy I think about is usually iPhone versus Android.
Hmm.
So I would say in my head, OpenAI and Anthropic are iPhone, and then Android is Meta. So Meta's basically taking the same exact tact, and people don't really know this unless they're like deep into the like Silicon Valley space, but Google's used the same exact playbook multiple times, where they utilized Android because they knew that they somewhat lost in the mobile space when it first initially kicked off with Apple. So they created Android open source, so then they could take more market share by having the open source standard that everybody else built on, so they could expand through others.
Hmm.
And that's exactly what Meta's doing with Llama. They're creating an open source variant everybody builds on top of so they can win the open source standard. Everybody can kind of like follow suit. So they may have not
Yes.
won the commercial like path with OpenAI and Anthropic, et cetera, but they're going to win through this path. So they're going to still take market share and do it through a different avenue.
Right. Yeah, I think Meta's play here is really interesting to look at and to analyze because they're not an AI company at its core, right? But they, in trying to catch up with TikTok, they purchased a bunch of GPUs a while back, years ago, so they could do this sort of what Zuckerberg calls like disconnected content idea, which is basically what Reels is now and what TikTok always has been. So it's less important around like who you're following in terms of what you see, and it's more important around like your interests. So it actually just works. It's just a better, it's just a better social media. And so they bought all these GPUs to like train these models to like have a disconnected content system in Reels, and then they just happened to have all those GPUs to train Llama, and so it's not part of their core business, but they could benefit from, being deeply involved in the development of AI and also taking the improvements that the open source community provides them and then baking that back into their own workflows, their own process, to further develop their own social media platforms. Um,
Mm.
so it's an interesting play.
Yeah. So is there I shared one thing here. Is there anything else you want to talk about or share through?
Let's see. I can I can do a quick one and just talk about this product that I made. So this is what this is kind of like the biggest project that I've made with Cursor so far. It's called Distill, and I actually made this kind of over Thanksgiving break, and it's gone through a few different iterations. In its current state, it's really cool. I use it every day, and I started it to solve my own problem, which was finding interesting things to talk about as a content creator. Um, and so I get on TikTok and I talk about tech, I talk about AI or whatever related topics every day, and going and finding information is a job. So in the past, I was spending quite a bit of time doing that. And what Distill does is it allows me to just pop in a topic up here using natural language like AI in politics, emerging new media artists as some examples, and it goes and finds content published to the web that relates to those topics and sends me a summary. It reads the content with an LLM, summarizes it in a few bullet points, and then emails me a summary every morning. So I get this sort of like executive brief in the morning of whatever I want to follow. It's kind of like Google Alerts, but like 1,000 times better.
Yeah.
It's freaking awesome. I can show you what I'm following right now. Oh,
And when you do these searches for similarity, how does it do the similarity? Like, how does it know what's close to? So, like, if I search like black lab, like,
hmm.
how does it find the closeness to that?
I'm leaning on Perplexity to do that job.
Oh, so they have an API you can use for search.
Yeah,
Nice.
I gotta get my password real quick. So here's some examples of things that I'm following. So these are like popular pulses that anyone can follow. So I'm following AI chips, AI in data centers. I'm not following any of these. And then I have some custom pulses at the bottom that I'm following. Um, I'm following quantum computing. I'm trying to get caught up on that domain. Software and AI spending across markets and segments. This is an interesting one. Broad adoption of AI will result in job creation, not job loss. This gets really interesting results because it's a hypothesis, right? It's sort of a prediction, and so it actually finds material that supports this prediction. So I could actually, if I wanted to, I could create an inverse pulse that says broad adoption of AI will result in job loss. and I could find, get updates on the opposite sentiment there. And let me show you real quickly what the emails look like.
This is interesting. So you do a search based off of the text via Perplexity API. It gets results back. You bucket that into, I'm assuming like a grouping of X number of things, and those are then run through a model that summarizes it in a format that you then ingest in an email.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's
Interesting.
that's pretty accurate.
What model are you using to summarize the results?
Llama.
Oh, open source. Interesting.
Let me share a different window here. So here's what some of the emails look like. So here's one on quantum computing.
Can you do Command plus? Yeah, there you go.
So topic is quantum computing, and this is all stuff from the past 24 hours, right?
Yep.
And so here's the 3 takeaways from today: advancements in quantum computing hardware. So Riggity's been in the news a lot. Google Willow's been in the news. IBM National Quantum Algorithm Center. I've never heard about that. So I have citations here as well that you can click into. That's super, super important. I would not have put this product out if I didn't have citations.
How did you get the citations included?
I get them through Perplexity.
They share those, and then when you summarize it through Llama, you ask it to keep the citation and put it in like a bracket like that.
Yeah, I have like this big regex, not big, but like a regex function that finds these brackets and swaps it out with a hyperlink.
That's very cool. And what version Llama are you using? Are you running it locally on your computer?
No, this is all in prod.
So you put it in like Google Cloud or Amazon or something like that?
Yeah, I'm hosting everything on Heroku. The version of Llama is also through Perplexity, so I don't have to host
Oh,
Llama myself. If I wanted to do something like that, I could, but probably what I'll do actually is, because I do want to create additional LLM layers to evaluate the output and refine it, and I'll
yeah.
probably use OpenAI for that instead of hosting Llama, because that's too much complexity.
You should you might know this group, but have you heard of Latent Space, the podcast?
I think did the organizer come speak in Asheville?
No, I wish. Well, one guy that was a part of the Discord, like he's not on the podcast, but he's a part of the Discord. One of them came to speak. But if I think it's called Small AI. So if you do SMOL AI news, yeah, news, yeah, that's it. And then they have a newsletter, AI News, that newsletter. So this guy, Swix, he built something similar to this, but
Mm,
it's dedicated strictly to AI, and it doesn't like you can't like choose things and like pick different things. But he's gone through a similar process where he pulls not just things from the web, but he goes to you can see it goes to Discord, Reddit, X, all these different things, and he summarizes all those through this newsletter.
mm.
And there's actually a few videos. If you go to his YouTube, you probably can find some of his videos that he talks through kind of how he built this in the back end. And it might be insightful for you on how he did it because it's actually really good what he's done here.
That's great. Yeah, no, I just subscribed. That's awesome. Um, is this an example of a recent newsletter?
No, if you go to archive at the very top
Okay.
and then click any of those, it gives you at the very top a summary. So I don't know if this is.
That's great. Tula
I think
context.
some of these are like really short at the top. So like this is like all the detail. So I usually don't read that section because it's way too long. But at the very top, he usually gives a detailed summary of like the coolest thing that happened that day because this is daily. And
All
some
of
of the
this
day,
is daily.
yeah, every single email I send is daily.
This is a lot of content.
Yeah, so that's why I don't read all of it.
That's cool though.
But
So all of this is one day.
yeah,
Okay. Cool. I mean, I think that's one of the problems I'm interested in solving is there's so much information out there, but how can we deliver it in a highly digestible manner?
Yeah. So if you go to a one that doesn't say like much, like, so a lot of these say like not much happened today, it was a quiet day, etc., etc. But if you go to one that doesn't say it's a quiet day or it's like a busier day,
Yeah,
it actually gives you a summary at the top.
like this one.
Yeah. So at the very top, you can see there's like a smaller summary of like the
Oh,
coolest thing that happened that day.
this section.
Yeah, so you can read through that before it gets to the recap,
This
and
is
then
cool.
yeah,
Interesting. Yeah, I'll check this out. I think this will be a lot of good inspiration for Distill because I do want to pull in additional data sources. I was thinking of doing X next. But yeah, I'd love for you to check it out. If you have any feedback, let me know. There's a free plan, so
for sure. And I guess like there's only two more things I wanted to share with the audience, and this can be no screen share needed. Um, so one actually, let me do this. So there's two things I wanted to share. One is dictation. So oftentimes when I ask questions of AI when I'm on the move, I almost always use dictation. I never type anything. And the ChatGPT app itself is extremely good at picking up what you're saying, converting it to text, and no matter how noisy it is. Like I've been in some weird places, and I've asked a lot of questions that are more like elongated and articulated, and it picks almost everything up perfectly. And I don't know if I can show this on the screen, but there's a little microphone on the right hand side,
mm-hmm.
and the little microphone is the dictation feature right next to advanced voice mode. Advanced voice mode. So I highly recommend that for
Oh,
asking questions.
let me see if I have that.
Yeah, I don't know if it's like a plus thing or if everybody has it.
Oh yeah, I do have it.
Nice.
You know what's funny though is um, I've always used Apple's dictation, but now they have their own up
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
So I guess it's maybe a similar experience, but using a different dictation model.
Yeah. So I use Apple's dictation on my Mac. So I use it sometimes when I'm on my computer as well. I'll do it on my Mac. But I found that the dictation in the app on the phone is so much better. And it must be because the models are using whatever they're doing on their side.
Yeah.
Um, So that's one thing. And the reason I think that it's useful is oftentimes we can communicate verbally faster than we can type, and we can often read faster than we can listen. So you get the best of both worlds. And that's often why I use it that way. And then one other one I wanted to share is advanced voice mode, which is something I know you've used a lot. I've I found like a few use cases that I've seen valuable. So one is acting as a doctor, so having it give me medical advice. And I know it's like you shouldn't do that. You should talk to a doctor. And yes, you should talk to a doctor, and all those caveats. But it's also nice to have somebody readily available when you want to talk to somebody in relation to the topic.
I do
Another one is
that. I do that too, and I always have to push the model because it's like real hesitant, right? It's like, I could weigh in with my opinion, but really you should consult a medical professional. And I'm like, I realize that, but I want you to be the medical professional. And eventually
exactly.
it concedes, and it's like, okay, here's what I think is going on.
Yeah. And and the other one is a therapist. So I've used it quite a
Mm,
lot as a therapist to
yes.
dive deep into different social issues I'm having in my own life. And the thing I found specifically prompting it, asking it to take on a persona for either a specific branch of therapy, of psychology, and or taking on a persona of somebody that you admire that you would like to get their perspective on in your situation, and then asking it to ask you questions iteratively. So ask me one question, I give you an answer. You take that as context to ask your next question based off of what I've told you. And then we'll do that on an ongoing basis until you feel like, as a therapist, you have enough information to provide recommendations based off of all the knowledge I've given you previously.
Yes.
So you can do that. I mean, I've had 45 to an hour long conversations with these different models that way.
I love that workflow. I have used that a few times myself in different contexts, but the general workflow of like, you know, model, you be the expert in whatever domain or task I'm working on. Ask me questions, get as much information from me as you need to then make a recommendation. I know I've used that in software updates when I'm, that's kind of how I've used 4.0 in the previous example. Have it, interview me. And I get really good results out of that. I think I would definitely try your suggestion of interpersonal or therapist context too. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So and also it's a great party trick as well. So if like for Christmas and Thanksgiving, I whipped out advanced voice mode so many times just
Nice.
so like my grandma and like some of my family, like they're like they know nothing about AI, because oftentimes I think to myself like, oh, so many people know about this, but the
Yeah.
community that we're in, you and I, it's like tiny, tiny.
True.
It's a few percent, like 5 to 10% of the people on the planet actually use these tools on a consistent basis. They may have heard of the word ChatGPT or they may have heard of OpenAI, but very rarely anybody uses these things.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
it's always fun because they had Santa on there on advanced voice mode as one of the voices. So I had Santa basically talking to everybody for like 2 weeks, which is great.
Cute. Love that. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
great. Yeah, it's good stuff, man. I appreciate you sharing that, and it's been a good convo.
it has. So I guess thank you for watching and listening. And Andrew, you I'm assuming you'll post this probably on your YouTube channel. So if you're on this, you know his YouTube channel. And if not, Andrew, you want to give a shout out for the people that are watching it on my YouTube channel.
Yeah. In terms of posting, yeah, I hadn't thought about that. It doesn't matter to me, or we can both post, or you can post, or whatever. But um, yeah, thanks everyone. You can check my channel out at AndrewShips. I'm on TikTok, I'm on Substack, I'm on YouTube under the same name, AndrewShips. So give me a follow, and I'll catch you later.
Awesome. And for me, I've never really done this before, so I think it's like D-Squared or something is the name of it. But if you can't find it, then we'll put it in the link in the description.
Yeah, we'll put links in the description.
Cool.
So
All
thanks,
right.
Dylan. See ya.